Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'm your host, Aaron Porras, and with me today to discuss the latest geopolitical developments are former Israeli ambassador to South Africa, Ilan Baruch, and returning panelist Avihu Sofer, a teacher of political science at Haifa University and a Ma'ariv columnist. Today we're here to talk about a recent humanitarian pledge from Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and the proverbial last leg to stand on for former IDF Sergeant Elor Azaria. Now, the Israeli military courts have just denied Azaria's appeal on manslaughter charges for killing an incapacitated Palestinian attacker last year. And with his 18-month jail sentence ahead of him and fewer options to choose from, the country is again torn over whether or not the man is a hero who should be pardoned or a killer who's getting off too light.
זה חייל מצטיין שהוא לא רצח, אלא הרג מחבל טרוריסט שבא להרוג בנו, ולא בא לתת לנו סוכריות. רבותיי, זה הזמן והמקום לשים קץ לכל ההתעללות בחייל, במשפחה שלו.
אני רוצה לראות אם שרואה את הבן שלה כבר 16 חודשים. 16 חודשים במעצר פתוח. לא חופשי ולא שום דבר. איך היא תרגיש? זה הכל. תחשבו, תפעילו את הדמיון שלכם. נורא פשוט.
والله أنا ماني قلقان فيه كلياته يعني أنت شايف جاي على شغلي مش قلقان فيه يعني ما إحنا عارفين شو الحكم يعني أكيد يعني براءة يعني من غير ما نعرف إشي وهدول يا جماعة يعني بس قدام الإعلان يعني سنة ونص ومش عارف إيش يعني ما أنت عارف حطوه في المعسكر يعني كأنه مش محبوس وبعدين حطوه في الدار قال يعني حبس منزلي وكله كلام فاضي ونزلوه في العياد وكله بس قدام الإعلان يعني كله كلام فاضي.
So my first question is the sentencing appropriate, or is it indeed nonsense, like Al-Sharif's father just said? Former ambassador, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think we need to look at the bigger picture. What is left with us after the case subsides into our memory? The claim Israel is very caring about. The IDF is the most moral military in the world, is dented. Here we have a case where a soldier executed a Palestinian assailant, attacker, when he was not anymore dangerous and was entitled to his life. Maybe in prison, maybe after sentenced, but not dead. And it will take a long time before the IDF can clear its way from this situation.
So I guess morally speaking, if they wanted to take that to a further degree and make an example of Elor Azaria, why was the sentencing so short? I mean, it's only 18 months.
That is beyond my. I'm not a lawyer, and it's beyond my comprehension. But if I ask myself, I would have been more at peace with myself had he been paying a price a lot higher than 18 months.
You?
Of course, I disagree with my friend, with Ilan, in regards to Elor. Elor Azaria is a soldier. He's a good soldier that went to the army and made a mistake. He made a mistake. I'm saying it blunt on front of the table. He made a mistake. He should have not shot the terrorist that came to murder him and his friends when the terrorist was lying on the ground. If he shot him while the event, this would have been okay. But between this and taking Elor Azaria and making him as a bad example of how the IDF is not a moral army, on the contrary, there's a whole dispute in Israel in the past 16 months in regards to Elor Azaria. Most of the Israeli citizens in Israel are supporting Elor not to be judged. Although that the IDF has been sitting in court for the second time and convicted Elor Azaria in manslaughter. In regards to the penalty, that's the penalty that the judge decided. I respect the court, I respect the army court, I respect the Israeli court. The bad thing about it is that Elor turned into a big political issue that everyone tried to gain a profit out of him. The right-wing people tried to gain a profit because they heard what the people want and they wanted to follow the crowd. So each one of them came with his own ideas of what should be done and what should not be done. The left-wing politicians came out with their own ideas. And in the middle is the army, and in the middle is the Israeli society. I think what have happened with Elor Azaria, tearing the Israeli society apart on the back of Elor Azaria and his family, and really his poor family, because his family is being used by people that want to take them to the right, to the left, to the center, to the back. They're changing their mind all the time. The whole issue with the army, the fight against the army, is not good. I think the army was pushed to the corner as well. So instead of sitting down and making Elor Azaria a case where a person made a mistake, he should pay his sentence, and the army should learn out of it, it turned into a whole bubble that everybody's trying to make a profit. The only one that lost is Elor, his family, and the Israeli society.
But so you've touched upon a few issues here. Is that the first, is he in trouble because he got caught? And it became this huge media bubble?
No. He's not in trouble because he got caught. He got caught and he made a mistake, point blank. There's no argue about it. I don't disagree. He made a mistake. He should have not shot the terrorist that was on the ground. Now you can say maybe he was scared that there's a bomb or there's not a bomb. Okay, this was they dealt with it through his trial. And once the judges decided, we respect the law. The problem is that everything else that was built on Elor's back turned this into a whole dispute which is not connected to Elor. And I disagree with my friend Ilan. I think the IDF proved that he is a very moral army, because under the pressure of politicians, the IDF came out with a decision which is against the public opinion in Israel.
So, I mean, yeah.
Well, I fully agree with the notion that the IDF as an establishment is a moral, where there's no doubt about its morality, but my worry is about the way foot soldiers are being encouraged to pass judgment and take life. And the case with Elor Azaria was made public by an eventual record on camera. We know, very sadly so, that there were many other cases whereby IDF soldiers were using their capacity to kill in a way, or to use force against the population in the West Bank.
So I'll ask you, do you think that his sentencing was too light and he was really only given that sentencing to make an example of him because he was caught and it was brought into public view?
I don't think I have the tools to make judgment on that. That is only my sentiment, but and that doesn't matter. What I think we should see now is taking the IDF leadership needs to take a very close look and see what are the soldiers on the ground in the streets of Hebron and Bethlehem and so on, what they think they need to do, how much they need to restrain themselves when it comes to Palestinians that are engaged in conflict.
So that brings me into the supposed Elor Azaria effect, which was this nice, grand kind of name for not wanting to act in the heat of a battle or any sort of situation.
It's not only not wanting to act. It's
for fear of litigation.
It's not only that. It's the fear of soldiers to act operationally, thinking they might find themselves in one way or another in a court, and that's not the only thing.
So is this
it's the soldier not feeling.
Is that
it's the
really
soldier not
happening?
feeling that they're backed. I'll tell you a story. When I was in the army, it was 30 years ago. I came out of Lebanon. I was in Lebanon. We were serving there, and so on. People used to stop the soldiers. People used to pick them up in lifts and so on. The army was a big thing in 1967 when I was born. The army was the biggest thing in Israel. It was mostly respected. I think we should be very careful by politicizing the IDF. The army should protect us and win the wars against our enemies. It is not a ground for political issues. It is not a ground for discussions, and it's not a civil society. It's not the Knesset. It's not the government. We should be very careful in putting a weight on the shoulders of 18-year-old soldiers, our sons, my son, Ilan's son, your son in the future, and so on, that are going to the army and distracting them into many different issues, everyone pulling them into a different direction.
At the same time, our soldiers must know that whether they want to be or not,
there are
commands.
There are commands. When you are a soldier in Hebron and somebody is coming to you with a knife, you should know what to do exactly. You can't start thinking now, what should I do? Is this okay? Is this not okay? There are commands, and you can't go against the commands.
Well, so here there was a case. To my question.
Here there was a case. No, but Elor went against the commands. Elor.
He went against exactly.
He's trying to say and justify himself that he felt he was scared because there's a bomb and there's not a bomb and so on. But at the end of the day, the court decided that he went against the commands. End of story. There's no argue about that.
Well, but that is my point: is that this Elor Azaria effect, this fear to act, may or may not actually exist because he was not afraid to act.
I understand.
He acted against orders.
I'll say 2 sentences about it. I think the soldiers and the army should feel that the whole civil society is behind them, that the government is behind them, that the Knesset is behind them. Having said that, although we have different opinions, and there are other people who have different opinions, we shouldn't pull the army into our political arguments, because we are really putting the soldiers in a situation where it could be very dangerous for them. Now, I don't think there's an effect of Elor Azaria. I think at the end of the day, the soldiers will act the way they're supposed to act, but we should be careful not to politicize the army.
I agree with Avihu in the sense that Elor will hopefully survive this drama and go on with his life after serving the 18 months or whatever. My issue is with the Israeli leadership. When politicians call for the killing of any assailant, no matter if he poses danger of life, is immoral, because you don't take the life unless you are threatened. If your life is threatened, then you can take life.
But Ilan, you know there are instructions to how to open in fire. You know,
yes,
there are instructions for that in the army. It's not something that everybody does according to
instructions. Yes. But the atmosphere is created not by the military or the IDF or General Eisenkot. It is created by Mr. Netanyahu and by ministers, by Erdan and ministers before him. Right. And I remember on television, the Minister of Homeland Security, whose name I forgot for the moment, was saying on television, on camera, he was saying, I expect my police officers to shoot to kill anyone who was so much so that we had cases where misunderstanding, 2 soldiers were actually opening fire on each other because they thought they were assailants. Life, the commandment number 1 is you don't take life. And I think also it is politically more savvy. I just want to say, I have good friends who lost their son in Lebanon. They lost their son in Lebanon because he was helpless and people killed him. And we always have to think of people lying in front of us who were trying to attack us as human beings. We need never forget human beings.
We'll have to see what ends up with that. But on that note, we're going to move on to our second topic, where all eyes are on the Middle East following the crisis of Temple Mount security measures being installed, the same measures that were subsequently removed in response to widespread riots across the Palestinian and Arab world. Now, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has pledged $20 million in support of the recovery of East Jerusalem's Palestinian citizens. Unfortunately, he also pledged nearly half of this year's foreign aid budget on paying salaries of terrorists and their families. That amounts to around $350 million. This newly released data from the Palestinian Authority's finance ministry itself again raises questions about how peace can be achieved while someone is stoking the flames of war. President Abbas's sentiments have hardly changed either, as shown by this video from 2015.
للأمام إن شاء الله نحييكم، نحيي المرابطات والمرابطين، نحيي كل ذرة دم أريقت في سبيل القدس، فهي دماء نظيفة، دماء نقية، دماء في سبيل الله إن شاء الله، وكل شهيد سيكون في الجنة، وكل جريح سيكتب له الله الثواب. كل إجراءاتهم لن نسمح بها. هذه التقسيمات، هذا الأقصى لنا والقيامة لنا، كلها لنا، لا يحق لهم أن يدنسوها بأقدامهم القذرة.
So, in relation to paying terror salaries and to the families of shaheeds or martyrs, as Abbas is calling them, Abbas said that it would be racist to call them martyrs, that he's doing a public service by paying these people and their families and supporting them for fighting against the occupation. Is there legitimacy to these statements?
Well, again, I'm calling you and our viewers to take a look at the bigger picture. In every struggle for liberation, and that is what the Palestinians are now experiencing, struggle for liberation against us, very unfortunately. In any such case, the constituency that is the most sensitive to the leadership of such a struggle is the people who are involved in armed struggle, their families. They are not getting salaries, they are getting pensions. And I think that it would have been very wise if the Israeli government would not make a case out of it, because it is very easy to regiment into that American legislators and Israelis and public opinion, and this undermines the base of the only one Palestinian leader with whom we have any chance to discuss peace, and that is Mahmoud Abbas. And very unfortunately, Netanyahu is very clever for many years to undermine the base of his adversary, and he is doing again by raising the issue of the salaries.
At the same time, the argument can be made that, you know, these salaries are going, these pensions, as you call them, are going to people who may or may not have attacked a soldier. So even though they're fighting against the occupation, they killed civilians.
You're right. And you don't reward people who are terrorists and are fighting by killing civilians. That is absolutely right. The question is it wise? What is the purpose? The purpose is to end the occupation and to bring the conflict to an end, so that there are no more people who using terror to try and gain the liberation. And I think that the shorter way to do it is to leave alone the pensions, even if, morally speaking, there is an issue here.
Now, okay, so moving on to kind of the United States and how foreign governments are viewing this issue and influencing it. You have in the United States the Taylor Force Act, among other similar acts, where they're threatening to cut now $240 million from the annual aid coming to the Palestinian Authority, which is a very large chunk. And then you also have in Israel, you know, threatening to subtract from the tax revenue that returns to the PA all the monies that the Palestinian Authority is spending on terrorists. With the continued loss of funds and the growing number of shaheeds and families who are receiving pension, how long can the Palestinian Authority keep this up? Are they not going to implode?
It's not only how long they're going to keep. You know, it's not even moral. Mahmoud Abbas is trying to speak about peace. On the other hand, you know, he's pouring oil into the fire and saying, let's turn off the fire. He's the one who's creating the fire. The shaheeds, or the people, the terrorists that are murdering women, children, the murder in Khalamish 2 weeks ago, the murder in Al-Aqsa. People are being encouraged to murder. They are being taught at schools to murder. The incitement, the Palestinian incitement, is to murder. They do not fight liberation against the soldiers. They are murdering women, children, babies, everywhere they can. They are slaughtering people. Those people, Mahmoud Abbas is taking, turning circles on their name, paying them money, and instead of putting the money back into the Palestinian authorities and creating infrastructure, creating work, creating education, and proper education for the Palestinians, where the money should go, it is going to murders. It is encouraging young kids and young youth to go and murder women and children and babies. How can you speak about peace to a certain like that? I totally agree when you say that there's an armed struggle between the Israeli army and the Palestinian forces, or between Hezbollah or the Israeli army. Okay, these are terror organizations, but they are fighting the army. But once you go against women, children, babies, you're slaughtering them when they sleep, when they're at their homes. How can you encourage that? How can you go to speak to this animal afterwards about peace?
Well, that kind of goes to connect.
Not to mention that the money, instead of going to the Palestinians themselves, is going to the murders.
To connect to Ambassador, to your statements from earlier, if in a sense, by encouraging attacks and encouraging martyrdom, isn't he feeding this propaganda machine that Netanyahu is using against him? Why not? Why not actually invest that money in an infrastructure or something like that?
If Abbas stands for one value, which is commendable, and I highly respect him for, it is nonviolent resistance. And the
but
picture.
He just said in the clip we played, he was talking about drops of blood.
He said, "We welcome every drop of blood spilled in Jerusalem." How can you commentate a sentence like that?
I tell you, I don't know, where did you take this clip from?
That he released that himself in 2015, in September 16th, 2015.
He spoke in Arabic.
Yes, he did. And that was translated by Palestinian Media Watch.
Yes, I know this Itamar Marcus. I know it's a very slanted organization.
But they translated his words, I'm sure.
The context is very, very important here. I met Abbas several times, and he is not a person that is pontificating for bloodshedding at all.
But Ilan, he's financing families of terrorists that are going and murdering children and women. How can you justify that?
No, he is not financing. People might think that he pays people so that they go and
he's
murder.
giving them allowances, okay,
he is,
pensions.
Because people who are involved in struggle are being rewarded, the families are being rewarded with a pension. That was the case in South Africa, in all African states, everywhere where you had a liberation movement.
But they murdered women and children in South Africa. They went and murdered women and children.
What do you think?
That are helpless, that are lying there in the little beds, you know, coming and murdering a baby.
Listen.
How can we justify
that? With this. This is propaganda.
No, I agree when you say there's a struggle against the Israeli IDF. I agree. I don't argue. There's an army.
You agree?
I don't support that, but I can understand it. So I'm saying there's an army, and on the other hand, there are terrorists that are fighting the army. But when you go and you attack children and women and babies, how can you ever justify something like that?
You need to step out of this state of mind. Because the leadership in Palestine is doing the utmost to go for a non-violent struggle. So much so that their own organizations of police are collaborating.
We know that. We know.
And
Israel, on the other hand, is supporting them with electricity, with water, with infrastructure.
What do you mean by
I'd like to hear the end of his statement, and then unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have.
What do you think? Giving them, it all belongs to them.
All right.
The money...
Ilan, look what's happening in the Arab countries. Unless Israel was here, the Palestinians would have been suffering the same as it is going in Syria, in Libya, and in the other countries which are tearing apart. In Egypt, unless Israel was controlling the West Bank and controlling Judea and Samaria, the Palestinians would not have those same conditions.
This is exactly...
Not to mention the fact that the Palestinians are working in Israel, in the Israeli economy.
But this is exactly what apartheid South Africa was saying about the black South Africans.
On that note, I apologize. On that note, we have to finish. I'm so sorry, but that's all the time we have for today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our guests, Avihu Sofer and Ilan Baruch, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you again next week, and shalom from Israel.